Dr. Green, thank you so much for hopping on a call with me today. I really, really appreciate it. We are excited to kind of hear more about your story and your experience working with Bob and Dentist Irene Pros. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to help.
Awesome. Well, so you are located out of the Minneapolis area. Your practice name is Imagine Smiles, and you've been doing amazing dentistry for 20 plus years now. And we're excited to be able to kind of share more about your experience. So what I'm hoping to do is to kind of roll the clock back a little bit before you started working with Bob and before you started realizing, hey, I might need to bring on another associate. So I'd love to just kind of hear, what was your state of mind at that point? What were you feeling, and what caused you to feel like, man, I shouldn't do this on my own. I should probably find someone to assist me with this.
Okay. Well, basically, I think what prompted me to go out and work with Bob more than anything else was just my own experience. My practice has been to the point where it has, wanted to grow dramatically for the past 7 or 8 years. And without going into detail, we'd had double-digit growth almost every year up until the time that I, ended up getting my associate. And it was just more of every year it was like, okay, I'm going to find somebody. I'm got to work through this. And, obviously dentists, we always watch the bottom line and we say to ourselves, okay, how can we do this? Where can we put ads? We don't really have an avenue or even a process really that's out there that, it's designed specifically to vet the people and try to find, the right person the first time to be able to get a good associate in there that is going to share your practice goals and practice values. Mm-hmm. I have personally been through a couple of different companies, I won't mention which ones, to try to do this. And it was always, that was more of I don't want to call it more of a matchmaker type of situation. It was more like a clearinghouse. These people would say, I needed a job or I'm looking for a job. They would sign up with this company. Then the prospective doctors who were looking for help would go and they would search that database and sign a contract, pay a whole bunch of money, and hope that it was right. And basically all that ended up being was basically just, a list of potential candidates, and you can talk to these people or those people after you pay your money. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, that's not our problem. That's your big deal, and you got to figure it out. So
yeah, it was a warm body with a dental license.
Well, not even a dental license. More than, to be honest with you, most people I dealt with were actually lawyers.
Really? Fascinating.
Yeah, the process was specifically legal people or people with legal background. And, they just did not have, really the experience that I appreciated. After a while, it just came to the point where it's like, okay, all you are is connecting me. You're not really a matchmaker. You're more of just a person with a Rolodex that has names in it. And then you throw a couple out, collect your money, and then just disappear. All right. So, because I'd had this constant year-over-year growth, I was getting run ragged, and I knew that I had to jump on this, all right? Because I was busy and very busy doing dentistry, I had to, basically just accept the fact that, as a doctor, my hands are more valuable than somebody else's mouth, and that I didn't really have the time nor the energy at that point to really have, the ability to go out and do this on my own. That plus, I didn't, now knowing the process that Bob does to be able to help find associates for other doctors, you really can't appreciate that until you actually go through it. But he did all the legwork for me. All the things that I wanted to say that I didn't know to say, he already knew because of his experience within the healthcare and dental industries. And it just made the process so much easier for me. It took a lot of the guesswork out of that I would say, I got at these other companies who I dealt with previously. And it was just more of a seamless process when I worked with Bob versus working with other people out there in the dental market.
Yeah. And so if I can understand kind of that state of mind you were in, you were slammed. I mean, you were working yourself ragged, as you said, right? I don't know how many hours you're putting in, but I'm assuming you're putting in a lot of work. And you were just like, I need help. I don't want to keep doing this, but I want my practice. I want to keep serving my patients. I want to provide quality care. Where do I find this kind of answer, and the answer would be bringing on a qualified, the right person and the right associate. And so then you turned to Bob, which you had met through, a bunch of different ways. But and so you kind of mentioned a little bit of how the process was. You felt like it took away a lot of the mental energy you had to put into it. He asked the right questions. He was providing and doing all the legwork. How did that make you feel? And where, do you feel like that allowed you to just continue to build your practice and focusing on serving your team rather than having to maybe go post Indeed ads, network to find connections? Where do you feel like, and how do you feel like the process was as we continued down the road?
Okay. Well, basically, I'll go back here a little bit and just kind of, start where I started to feel like the process was needed. All right. Because, every doctor asks themselves, when you go out in private practice, when do you go and you find help? All right. And in hindsight, I would offer this advice, start finding help when you start to feel stressed. All right. And it's not a monetary stress, it's a workload stress. People are always stressed about money, so that's kind of an irrelevance in this process. You get to a point, mentally where you become frustrated with dentistry. At least I did anyway. Personally, I really enjoy my job. And when I started having the people around me say, "You're really getting crabby," I started to wake me up a little bit and say, "Okay, you know what? Why are you so crabby?" And I knew I love being busy. I don't like it when my days are, quiet and boring. A lot of people do. I'm not one of those guys. I like to go and feel like I got done at the end of the day and say, that was a great day's worth of work. And sometimes I make a lot of money doing that, and some days I don't. It just depends on every day. So it's all it adds up in the end that matters. Regardless, if I had to give advice as to when to say, when this process should kind of start, I would easily go back to your schedule book. Now, granted, in COVID, this is a little bit more, or during COVID, this is a little bit more of a challenge because of the fact that, we constantly have cancellations because people get sick at the last minute and they, sometimes will call in. So it's hard to gauge it. And our schedule books have been pushed back farther and farther. All right. So I'm speaking within the context of pre-COVID, okay, which hopefully we'll get back to sometime soon. But basically, I would encourage anybody who is wondering, when do I start this process? Start it when you start looking at your schedule book and you cannot book somebody for at least 3 to 4 weeks out, okay? So if your schedule is full and there's nowhere to put somebody who needs a simple filling or a crown or something like that, and you're out 3 to 4 weeks, then you should be saying to yourself, okay, I need to find help, all right? Because it's a situation where you're now potentially, stepping over quarters to pick up nickels. A lot of the people that we see that rely on us, that really appreciate our work, are those people that look for the procedures that are potentially, high revenue procedures, things like extractions or, sometimes even crowns, but root canals in particular. I know a lot of dentists who don't like doing root canals. I personally love to do them. And I've referred out hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of root canal income that I could have easily done in my own office, or implants for that matter. Just because I didn't have the time or the ability to see them in a timely manner. And nobody, when they're in pain, wants to wait 3 or 4 weeks for an appointment. They want to get in right away. Okay. Yeah. So I would say, start the process, or start thinking about the process when you look at your calendar and your scheduling book, and it's 3 or 4 weeks out before you can get somebody back in. That's when you start to need to raise the white flag and say, I need help. Okay.
Yeah. And let me add just a little bit of context there too, Dr. Green. Part of our process is we do a practice vetting before we actually officially join and take on a new client. And what we're looking for is we typically pull up dental intel. If you don't have it, we ask you to get it. And we're looking for a practice within a practice. And I'll tell you what, more and more dentists out there are running what we call a practice within a practice. You're running 2 practices because you're just working too hard, you're too busy. And it does exactly that. You're not allowed, you disallow yourself to work on the bigger cases and take more of the emergency cases. And it doesn't allow you to serve the patients in the best way possible. And so that's why bringing on, associate it could possibly be an answer for that. So sorry, I kind of cut you off. Let's keep going.
Okay. As far as how the process went with Bob, I think the process itself was fairly seamless. And the one biggest hangup that I had with it from the very beginning was cost. Okay, and I've had several people tell me that, because this whole process is not cheap. And looking back at it, I look at what other people charge me for this same service that he has offered me. All right. And it was, substantially less than the process through Bob. Okay. Now, that being said, I will also say that it has been the best money I could have spent in the long run. There's the old adage in life: you pay for what you get. And the two things that you get in particular that really stand out in my mind with Bob and just dental hiring pros in general through this process has been one, the vetting process. All right, because those are, again, like I mentioned when we first started the interview, was that there were questions that I should have answered or should have asked these people when I talked to people previously, or when I interviewed potential candidates previously to working with Bob. And basically I didn't know what to ask these folks. And he, having gone through the training he's gone through, I would say the missing link to finding that good partner. Okay. And I was able to focus on dentistry, knowing that I was still going to be shelling out a fair amount of money to be able to get this process going. All right. So knowing the questions, or allowing him to be able to know the questions to ask, to be able to determine, is this candidate going to work for you or not? And then, you have an outside influence there as well. That he, part of the process is that he has you, do a self-evaluation as well. He knows what type of person you are. So he's going to know what type of person this other person is. And because of his experience with Covey, he knows who's going to work well with others, who's going to play well in the sandbox with others. All right. And, with me, I'm a very type A type of person. And he knew I need to find somebody that is going to not, take his perfectionism, personally, and it's going to work out. So, and I'm using myself as the example here, obviously, but I would say that most dentists are by nature, very detail oriented. And as a result of that, they have different personalities. And it's important to be able to know who works well with who. And Bob took all the guesswork out of that for me completely. All right. Yeah. The other part of the process that is just crucial, and has been, because it's been about 1.5 years since I added my associate to my office, is the follow-up. All right. And again, I mentioned these other companies that I'd worked for. None of them had this hands-on approach after the fact to help guide through the associate period, and then potentially bring on the doctor as a partner doc, or, in some way, shape, or form, an owner, all right, after the process is done. So having that resource, as, I brought the associate in and been able to train them and, work towards that partnership, has just been crucial. All right. So I would say those are the two biggest factors that have really made this process, I would say, fairly easy. And again, I will stress, you get what you pay for. Is it a lot of money?
Absolutely.
Yes, but it's been worth it.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about, we try to help dentists look at the costs. So if you're happy, there's two costs here. There's the direct cost of the money you have to pay to receive the service, but there's the opportunity cost that I don't think is often considered, which is if I'm having to spend time looking, interviewing, and doing all the energy of finding this associate, that's taking me away from serving my patients, or it's taking away my mental energy to be with my family, or whatever that may be. There's definitely a massive opportunity cost. The other one is the industry standard is that those associateships fail 75% of the time. Our success rate is 90% success rate. And so the opportunity cost of hiring the wrong person is massive. There's, if you actually take in the cost of having to, if the dental divorce, if you will, actually happens, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in missed opportunities, and having to recoup the training on the team and recoup the morale, and then having to restart the process. It may sound like a lot of money, but a new associate typically brings in, $50,000, $60,000 of new business within the first 6 months to a year. And you're already seeing a return on your investment within, a few months of that person actually coming on and joining your team. So at first, sure, there might be a little bit of sticker shock, but we really try to invite dentists to think bigger, like you did, because there's a bigger game here. There's a bigger plan. And we know our model works. And a big part of that is what you mentioned, which we call the marriage counselor stage, which is where we stay engaged for the next 18 months. Because even though we set the right person in the right room and you're working together and everything looks great, we're still human and we're still going to run into problems. And it's always nice to have someone to be able to come in, help you step back and work through maybe some of those problems together. And we also train and teach you how to set that new associate up for success, to make sure that they're off the ground running really fast. How do we push business towards them? How do we help the team accept them and support them? So there's so much more to it than just, hey, we're going to go find and hire you an associate. It's a much bigger process than that. So let's take it to present day. You've been working with a new associate for about 18 months. What have you seen in your business and your life? And just kind of want to hear where you're at now.
All right. The business side of it is, obviously there's been improvements from a revenue standpoint. Obviously, when you bring on a second doctor, it's going to have, financial gains, obviously.
Yeah.
Because now there's two of you, so. Just one of you.
You sure hope so, right?
Simple math will, equate to that. Now, granted, it's hard to really gauge how well it's done, again, because of COVID. COVID has really made gauging the success level, really, engaging it right now is really, really hard because we've had so many cancellations resulting, as a result of having COVID positive tests. So I would love to give you a more rosy picture, but it's very difficult to be able to gauge the true amount of success that it has created from a financial standpoint. I will tell you this, from a standpoint of just patient acceptance, all right? My patients know that I am a perfectionist, all right? And they knew that I was looking for an associate, or have been looking for an associate for, 5+ years before I found my current associate. And it was interesting because when he first came into my office, my current associate anyway, he came into my office, at first people were just slightly gun shy, at least some of them were, but a lot of them, basically looked at him after they met him and they said, well, if Dr. Green trusts him enough to be able to work in my mouth, then he obviously has really taken a lot of time to think about this, because Dean knew that I'd been looking for quite some time, and to have finally found somebody that I let into my sandbox, so to speak, was a big deal for them. So there was a lot of blind trust that my patients had in that whole process. Now, what has it done for me personally? A couple of different things, and I shouldn't say just personally, because I think personally and professionally, there's kind of a tight knit, what do you want to call it? Just a weave there.
Absolutely.
Personally, being the only man in the practice, having another male influence has been very nice, because if you have a situation whereby you're like, oh, this really frustrates me, but you can't really relate to the ladies that work for you, it's nice to have a sounding board. Okay. That plus it's nice to bounce ideas off. They always say that two heads are better than one, and having a younger doctor with some younger ideas. Now, granted, I try to keep myself fairly current, but just to hear him, talk about certain things and have a different perspective on them is nice, because, it blossoms ideas, things grow out of that. And it has really been kind of nice to have an extra, opinion around from the male perspective anyway, as well as from a professional perspective. Now, the other side of the coin is the personal life, all right, which again is, you mentioned to it or alluded to it earlier, the effect on my personal life, having another, set of hands to be able to help people out, has taken the stress levels for me and dropped them dramatically. I was very, very, very stressed. Like I mentioned earlier, when people started coming to me and saying, why are you so crabby? First you're like, what do you mean I'm crabby? I'm not crabby. You get very standoffish and you realize, okay, even the standoffish that you're giving is crabbiness. So, my staff has noticed it. My patients have noticed it. They know that I'm enjoying dentistry more now. I don't feel so rushed and frazzled to be able to help people get from point A to point Z in their treatment journey, regardless of whether it's something simple or complex. But just my persona, either out in public or in the office, has just taken a dramatic turn in the right direction. I have more energy. I feel more positive. I don't feel as frustrated. I don't lose my cool as, easily as I used to. Not that I would consider myself a hothead, but it just has had a very positive effect on my personal life as well as my professional one.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Green. I hope that, people get an opportunity to watch this and hear about your experience and, open their eyes to what other possibilities are out there of, maybe bringing on and expanding their team. So just want to say thank you. We're excited for what 2022 has to offer for Imagine Smiles Dentistry. I know it's going to be a fantastic year for you guys. And as always, we're here to support you in any way we possibly can. So thank you.
All right, Brighton. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.